Today's daf is daf Hey in Masechet Gittin, which is a new Masechta from last Sunday, I would say. Not from today, but from last Sunday. And so we've been having this long discussion. The Mishnah started off by saying that a person who's mevi get, Medinat Hayam, a person who delivers a get from far away, we said outside of Eretz Yisrael, has to say, B'fanai nichtav u'b'fanai nechtam. I saw it written and signed. And we had two opinions about why. One answer, Rabba's answer was because we're afraid that outside of Israel, they're not bikiyim l'shma. They don't really know how to do it. And we're afraid that someone later on might come and say, oh, it's not a good get because they didn't do it right. So this person should say, this is a get and it was done right. Maybe it's to protect the woman. We'll see this later. Because it protects her in the sense that no one can then question the get. The second answer of Rava was because ein edim mitzuyim l'kaima. If someone later on says this is a false get, you're not going to be able to verify the witnesses because they're in Barcelona and you're in Israel. So therefore, you should at least have the aide get up and say, I saw it done. And in that special circumstance, his testimony counts as maybe a few. We're going to see in today's Gemara, who does he say this to? Right? Because saying it to no one obviously means nothing. So does he say it to two people, to three people? So we'll get to that. I'm going to, because some of us were not here yesterday, on Daf Hey, I'm going to start from the sixth line from the top. The Gemara says, L'Rava nicha l'Rabba kasha. According to Rava's thought, this makes sense. According to Rava, it's a question. And the answer, I'm not going to go through the whole question, but the answer is, Hacha b'maya skinan la'achar shalamdu. After people learned. Meaning, Rabba says that I feel, remember, Rabba's reason was that people wouldn't know how to do a get. But over time, people got smarter. Education, I said yesterday, Daf Yomi spread, right? People learned. And so as time went on, people knew how to write a get. And you no longer needed them to say, B'fanai nechtam, B'fanai nechtam. Ask the Gemara, Yachi Yachol Nami, why does the Mishnah say that if you bring a get and you become mute, remember the case was, you brought the get, you handed it over, and then you couldn't talk, you got sick, and that moment, you had a stroke or a heart attack, right? And you couldn't say, B'fanai nechtam, B'fanai nechtam. So why, and then we said you don't need to say it, you can use the edim. But why don't you say the same thing even if you could say it? If the people are now knowledgeable, you no longer need B'fanai nechtam, B'fanai nechtam. Yachi yachol nami, says the Gemara, Gzeira shema yachzar davar l'kulkulo. It's a gzeira, because maybe even though today people are educated, unfortunately you can lose education. People, communities that were once very bright lose their scholarly activity. And maybe the rabbis didn't want to stop the takana. So once they made a decision to say, b'fanai nechtam, they never wanted to stop it. So if that's true, then if the person comes to deliver the get and he hands over the get and then he has a heart attack and he can't say it, it shouldn't count because he didn't say b'fanai nechtam. Says, well, that's a very unusual case, right? Pikeach v'nitcharesh, to be intelligent and be able to speak. And then in that split second after you hand over the get to become mute and unintelligent, which is the Gemara's equivalent of mute, that is milta de lo shchichi. That's it's a thing that is not common. Umilta de lo shchicha lo gazer berabanan. The rabbis did not extend the gezerah to that case. So says Rabbah, you really nowadays don't need to say b'fanai nechtam, because everybody knows how to write a get, right? Everyone who's writing a get, I guess. But you do, but we kept it in place. But we didn't keep it in place in these very unusual circumstances. Ask Marbaha Isha, what about the case of a woman? Let's say the woman who's getting divorced, comes from Barcelona. She shows up in the court in Jerusalem or anywhere and says, this is my get. My husband gave this get, my ex-husband, I guess, or he's still a husband, so you give over the get. Husband gave me this get. It's signed by two witnesses. So does she have to say, b'fanai nechtam, b'fanai nechtam? She's the messenger. Says the Gemara, Va'isha de lo shchicha. Now, it's not common that a woman comes with her own get. It's just not typical. It's not, and we're going to have a Mishnah later on that says, Ha'isha atzma mivia gita, the woman herself, the wife herself can bring the get, so you have to say it. Now, why do you have to say it? If we're talking about a time, according to Rabbah, where it's no longer necessary, and you only do it because of some gezerah, and they only made a gezerah in common circumstances, why does the woman have to do it? So we answered, Shelo techlot b'shlichut. We don't want to differentiate among shlichim. If a shliach can say it, they have to say it. The guy who lost his mind because he had a heart attack or a stroke can't say it, so therefore he's excluded. Ihachi, so if it's true, what about the husband? Balnami. Even the husband who brings the get has to come to court. And Lalamatanya, we learned in a Braita, Hu atzmo shevi gito, if a husband himself shows up at court and says, this is the get that I gave or I'm giving to my wife. I didn't give it yet. I want to give to my wife. He doesn't have to say that. He just hands it to the court, right? The court says, hand it to her, or they give a shliach to give it to her, and then it's a good get. Why is it a good get? Why doesn't he have to say, says the Gemara, because what was one of the reasons, according to Rashi, according to Tosfos, this is all the reasons, that we said that you have to verify a get, is because we're always worried that anytime a husband gives a get, a woman goes out and says, I'm now divorced, I can marry anyone, I'm free. The husband, unfortunately, there's acrimonious situations or challenges, and people, it was especially then, it's probably very uncommon, and the husband would be ma'arer, or someone would be ma'arer and say, you're not properly divorced, in which case no one would want to marry her, and everyone would be scared, and if she had new marriage, her children would be suspect. So that's a terrible situation. And so because of that, the Chachamim said, we're going to make sure that every get is an ironclad get, right? So that no matter what anyone says after the fact, we'll say, we checked it out and checked it out. This is great. She's good, right? It's a good get. So what are you worried about? The husband's going to come and say, oh, no, I never wrote that get, or it was a mistake. I never gave it, or they found it in my papers and took it, and make the get puzzle. He's the guy bringing it to court, right? So when the husband is the person bringing it to court, you're not worried he's going to then come and challenge it. Everyone's going to say, you brought it yourself. What do you mean it's not a good get? They didn't find it in a garbage heap, right? You did it. And so therefore, question, rhetorically. So he's not going to then ask questions. Okay. So that's where we actually did all that yesterday, but it's a good repetition because the Gemara is about to repeat the whole thing again. Tashma, halfway down, come and learn. Shmuel asked a very interesting question to Rav Huna. Our Mishnah that we've been discussing for the last 3 days is talking about a case where a single shliach brought a get, which was probably typical, right? Because you wouldn't hire two people to do a job that one person could do. So you hired one person to deliver the get. But what if two people showed up with the get? So Shmuel asked Rav Huna, Shnayim sheviu get mimedinat hayam. What happens then? If two people show up and say, we are messengers from Barcelona to deliver this get, do they need to say, do they have to say, bifanenu, plural, it was written and signed? Oh, do they not need to? Because maybe you don't need them to say it, because all you need, of course, is in a situation where it's one witness, where then if someone questions it, one witness is not more powerful than two, right? But if you already have two to begin with, why can't you say that establishes the facts? So that was the question. So he said to them, Amar le, so Shmuel said back, Shmuel asked Rav Huna, Amar le, this is a very interesting case because Shmuel and Rav Huna were contemporaries, but Shmuel was, a sort of previous generation. But Rav Huna, who was the Dayan, of course, in Bavel, said, Ein tzrichim. You don't need to say b'fanenu nechtav, b'fanenu nechtav. Why? Ma ilu yomru, b'fanenu gersha. If two people walked into court and said, they didn't have a get in their hand. They said, we watched Ruvain divorce his wife, Sarah. Then Sarah's mutter to marry anybody. You don't even need a get because they're two witnesses. They establish facts. So because they could establish the facts, they don't need to actually support what they're saying, right? They don't need to say, b'fneinu nichtav, b'fneinu nichtav. So that was what he answered, what Rav Huna answered, right? Now, says the Gemara, hanicha, I'm sorry, where am I? The Rava nicha. According to Rava, that's great, because Rava said the whole reason you need to say, b'fnei nichtav, is in case people come to doubt the get. But here you have two, so you can establish the get is true. But the Rava kasha, because so what if there's two people who showed up, right? If they came from Barcelona, and we think in Barcelona they don't know what they're doing, two people don't know what they're doing more than one person. They're ignorant, so we need to establish that. Says the Gemara, this Braita must be referring to after people got smart. So they even in Barcelona they know how to write a get properly. Well, if that's true, then why can't you say that one person doesn't need to say b'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nichtav? Because gzeira shema yachzer davar lekilkulo. Because we made a gzeira that people might forget the halacha, and therefore it might go back to the way it was. Again, why would it be different for two or one? Why do you say the same question for two? Says the Gemara, because it's not common for two people to bring a get, right? Usually if you hire a person, you hire one person. You ever seen two delivery men coming together? Maybe. If it's uncommon, the rabbis don't make a gzera. So they only made the gzera to continue saying when there is one shliach, not two. Asking one of the same question we just had about Isha. What about the wife herself brought it? That's certainly not common. And Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Isha atzma mivia gita. A woman herself can bring her get. He atzma she, though, has to say, I saw it written and signed. Says, well, it's true that it's uncommon, but she's a single shliach, and we don't want to make a difference between one person or another person. So I want to see the same thing about the husband, which again is unusual for the husband to bring the get. Alama Tanya, again, this is all a quote from earlier today. Why did we learn in a Braita? The husband himself who brings the get does not have to say, I saw it written, I saw it signed. And again, the answer is because the whole reason to say is because he might come to challenge the get. But if he's bringing it himself, he's not going to come challenge it. Why did the Chachamim say you have to verify the get when you bring it? Because Dilma Ati Balma Arer Upasale. Worried the husband's going to come and raise suspicion and make it puzzle. Hashta minka naka lebiyade. Here he's holding it in his hands. In other words, minka naka, he's holding it. It's a double verb, right? He's holding it in his hand. And he's going to then doubt and say, I didn't mean it. He himself brought the get. Okay, so that is the first Gemara today, really a repetition of the same discussion, which the Gemara does to help us remember everything. Tashma, now we're two lines from the end of the narrow lines. Tashma, let's try to prove. We're still trying to prove Rabba and Rava from another Braita. Pretty much, if we keep doing this, we'll quote the whole Masechta before we even start, right? We're quoting all kinds of Mishnayot and Braita from later on. The Gemara loves to do this, as we all know, right? It loves in the beginning to like throw in things from later, so you start getting a feel for the whole Masechta. So you're getting a good sense here. Tashma, let's bring another case. Hamevi get mi Medinat Hayam, right? A person shows up from Barcelona and to Yerushalayim, to Lud, let's say. He goes to court where the woman's living in Lud, and he says, I have a get for you from your husband who lives in Barcelona, and Natnula. And he hands it to the woman in front of judges. V'lo amar b'fanai nechtam, fanai nechtam. He doesn't say what he's supposed to say. So says the Braita, im nitkayim b'chotamav kasher. If you can validate it by the signatures, if you can go out and someone says, we recognize the signature, is this Reuven's signature, is this Shimon's signature, then it's kosher. The imlav pasul, right? Havi. Then it's pasul. Okay. I'm sorry, imlav pasul. If they can't validate the signatures, it's pasul. Havi, this is what they meant to say, or this is how they said, because we didn't say that you have to verify a get to make it harder for a woman to get married, and we did it to make it easier for her. Okay? Meaning, the whole point of b'fanai nechtam, according to this Braita, is that if a woman brings gets a get, and then 3 months later, someone comes and says, what do you mean that's a get? One messenger brought it. You don't trust one messenger. I think it's doubtful. We say to him, doesn't matter what you think. If at the time that you gave it, that one messenger said, it counts forever. So that's to make her life easier. If the guy doesn't say it, then you can't count the get. But if other people can verify the signatures, it counts. So again, le Rava nicha. According to Rava, that's great. Because Rava says the whole point is, can you verify the signature? So if you can, you can. But the Rabba Kasha, Rabba's problem is that they don't know how to write a get in Barcelona. So if they don't know how to write a get in Barcelona, who cares if there's two people or one person? They might have written it wrong, or meaning with the wrong intention. Okay, so you have to give the same answer we've given 3 times today. that this Braita was taught after people became smart, and we no longer had suspicion that they don't know what they're talking about. But you said that even after people became smart, you can't do it because we're afraid they're going to forget. So if we're afraid they're going to forget, you have to require b'fanai nechtam. Answers the Gemara a brand new answer. 4 lines from the bottom. Kishen niseit. We're talking about a case where she already got remarried. If she hadn't gotten remarried, we would not let her get married because we would say you didn't do the get properly. But she already got remarried. We're not going to tell you got to divorce your husband. Your kids are mamzerim or suffik mamzerim because it wasn't a proper divorce. We're going to allow her to stay married. Says the Gemara, right? The reason that we trust them is not because the purpose of a fanai nechtam is to make life easier for her. Why do we trust them? Because she's already married. Mishum dini say to, right? 2 lines on the bottom. The reason we're allowing her to get away with this get is because she's already married. So we don't want to make her undo the marriage or chas v'shalom, make her kids mamzerim. Says where hachikamer. This is in fact what the Braita was saying exactly. The purpose of this takana is to help her. And in this case, it's obviously not going to help her to say that her marriage is null and void and she's got to divorce and send her kids out. So now this is how we're reading the Braita. If you're going to say that we should be very strict with her, and since when she got the get, no one said b'fanai nechtam lafka, she should divorce her husband. She should be kicked out, right? Havi, this is what they said. The purpose of a fanai nechtam is to make her life easier so that people cannot doubt her marriage and make her suspect in front of other people. Says the Gemara, top word of Daf Hey Amud Bet. Time of mind. Now, what's the reason that we're continuation of the reading? What's the reason that we said b'fanai nichtam? Because Doma ati bal ma'arer, her ex-husband's going to come and say, I don't trust that the get is not real. Upasole hashta baal lo ma'arer. What you're saying now, the husband is not going to be ma'arer. Anan nekum v'na'arer. So I'm sorry, it's a different question, right? So that the reason is the reason that we're worried, right? That we want there to be b'fanai nechtam is because the husband might come and be ma'arer. But in this case, she got married. No one was ma'arer. What are we going to do now? We're going to come and make an irur. No one else questioned it. She got married. Life went on. And so therefore, there's no reason for us to complain and no reason for us to require her to have a get that the shliach said, v'fanai nechtam, because she was already married. So that is how we answer that Braita according to Rabbah. Now says the Gemara, 3 lines on the top of Daf Hey Amud Bet. We'll take a deep breath for this. This machloket of Rabbah and Rava is in fact the same argument that was had 100 years before. I think it was probably 100 years before with Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, maybe not 100 years, say 60 years before. Is beplukta the Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. If you recall, Rabbi Yochanan was a very, very, very early Amora, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was one of his students and contemporaries. And they also had the exact same argument in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, if you bring a get, you have to say b'fanai nechtam. If you bring a get from foreign lands, from Medinat Hayam, and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi sat down, and Chad Amar Lefi Shein B'kiyin L'Shma. The reason you need to say that is because we're afraid that in Barcelona they don't know how to write a get. And Chad Amar Lefi Shein Eidim Mitzuyim V'Kaima. It's because the witnesses are not here; they're in Spain, and so you can't find the witnesses. So if you ever have a doubt on the get, you're going to have to verify it. So let's verify it now. And we don't know which one said what. If Rabbi Yochanan said one or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said one. The tistayim, if you're intelligent like we all are, and you know many stories, it makes sense that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is the one who said, "Udamar lefi shein b'kiyin l'shma." Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi must be the one who thinks it's because they don't know what they're doing outside of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because there was a story that happened. Famous story. Reb Shimon bar Abba. Once they were sitting in the Beit Midrash, and Yeshua ben Levi lived in Israel, right? Like Rabbi Yochanan. And they were sitting there, and Reb Shimon bar Abba showed up, Aita Gita the Kamed Rabbi Shua ben Levi. He brought a get to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and the get came from Spain, happens to be, from Barcelona, right? Our favorite example. Rashi does not say that. He says it came from Medinat Hayab. And Amar Le, Rabbi Shua ben Levi said to Rabbi Shimon bar Abba, Srichna lemeimer b'fanai nechtav. Sorry, he asked him, when he gave the get, do I have to say, Srichna lemeimer b'fanai nechtav or lo? Do I have to say it or not? Am I in the special category? I'm a rabbi. Do the rules apply to me? Amar Le, Rabbi Shua ben Levi said to him, Lo tzricha, you don't have to say it. Why? Because lo amru ela b'dorot harishonim. They only said that back in the old dark ages. Shein b'kiyin l'shma. People were really not that. No one knew the halachot. It was before they had, as they all say, before they learned Daf Yomi or had Gemaras, right? Ava b'dorot ha'achronim. But nowadays, in our taste, it says Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the b'kiyin l'shma lo. Now that everybody who writes a get knows the basic rules that you've got to write it l'shma, you don't have to worry anymore. And so therefore, you don't need to say b'fanai nechtav, b'fanai nechtam. So that seems to be pretty clear. Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds that the reason you don't need to say it is because the reason you used to need to say it is because ein b'kiyin l'shma. And nowadays that we're b'kiyin, we don't need to worry about it. So tistayim. That's a terrible proof. You forgot yesterday's Gemara, right? Because yesterday's Gemara said that even Rabbah, who said the reason was that you have to say it is because ein b'kiyin l'shma, also agrees with the reason of Rava, that you have to say it because you can't find the witnesses to verify it. So who cares if everyone's smart and you wrote the get correctly? You still need two witnesses, or at least one witness, to say the fanai nechtam, in case people come and doubt, doubt the get. So you would still need it, right? So says Gemara, but Tizbra, do you really think that's a good proof? Rabba itlei de Rava. Rabba holds like Rava. The Ode, and furthermore, even if it's true that everyone's so smart nowadays, we just said that that's not good enough to change the rules. The rule is that you still have to say it because you might be smart, but you know, kids in America used to be really good at math. Look at them now. So Ella says, that's not a proof, because the case must be that Reb Shimon bar Abba, who showed up in Reb Shimon in Reb Yeshua ben Levi's Beit Din, was not alone. He came with another person. In the Shachrina Havi Bahadeh, he had another person with him. He was two people. And so once you're two people, right? Once you're two people, you don't have to worry anymore that there can't be Mekayim the Eidim, because you don't need to be Mekayim the Eidim. You have two Eidim in front of you. And so why didn't we mention that detail? Why did we leave that specific part out? They didn't answer because you're not going to say Rabbi Shimon showed up with Jeff, right? So they just mentioned Rabbi Shimon, but he was with two people. So again, now the case, and this seems to be pretty clear, that Rabbi Shimon showed up with another person, so they could verify that the witnesses are okay, or they don't even need to verify that. But if you have a problem that ein b'kiyim l'shma, right, that people don't write it correctly, you still need to say b'fanai nechtam, right? Because Rabbi Shimon did not write the get, he just brought the get. And so therefore said Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because we're smart nowadays, we don't need you anymore to say b'fanai nechtam. And so it seems that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi holds like Rabbah, which means Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rava. Thank you. Perfect. Keep that in mind, because we're about to say something different. Itmar. 2 dots, 10 lines down on Daf Hey Amud Bet. Itmar. Says the Gemara, this is Amoraim arguing, Bifnei Kama Notna La. How many people have to be there, right? One shliach brings the get, hands it to the wife. Who has to observe that? What's the audience, right? Is there a Beit Din of 3? Does it have to be one person, 2 people to be witnesses? How many people have to be part of the get ceremony? Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chanina, they argued. Rabbi Yochanan, the same Rabbi Yochanan, and a new partner, Rabbi Chanina, Chad Amar b'fnei Shnayim, the Chad Amar b'fnei Shlosha. One said you need 2 witnesses, 2 observers, or 2 people, and one said you need 3. Tistayim, says the Gemara, let us assume the Rabbi Yochanan who the Amar b'fnei Shnayim. Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says you need to do it in front of 2. Why? The Rav in Bar Rav Chisda, I to get to the Kamed Rabbi Yochanan, right? Once Rav in Bar Rav Chisda came in front of Rabbi Yochanan with the get, V'amar Lane, he said to him, Zil Havla, give it to her, ba'ape trey, in front of two people, the emalahu, and say in front of those two people, b'fanai nichtav, b'fanai nichtav. So tistayim, that's not a question, right? Rabbi Yochanan very clearly just said you need to have two people in the audience, not three people. So we proved that Rabbi Yochanan holds that you need two people in the audience, which means that Rabbi Chanina must hold that you need three people in the audience. Now says the Gemara, why would one say two and one say three? Probably it has to do with the machloket Rabba and Rava, like everything else in the world, right? So why would one say two and one say three? Says the Gemara, Lema b'hakam miflagim. This is the basis of their argument. Demand amr b'fnei shnayim kasavar l'fishein b'kiyan l'shma. If you have to have two, it's because you have to verify that they did it correctly. So basically, I have to testify they did it correctly. I say I'm the messenger. I say it in front of two, and that's good enough. They're witnesses, right? But man amr b'fnei shlosha kasavar l'fishein edim mitzuyim l'kaimo. The whole problem is that you're never going to find edim to verify this. So therefore, you have to do it in front of a court. Right? Three is a beit din. And once you do it in front of a court, it's signed and sealed. No one can doubt this get anymore. So if you do it in front of three, then it'll be confirmed. Ask the Gemara. So that doesn't make any sense.
We said a couple of days ago that actually the shaliach can be one of the three.
We're going to get there. We're going to have that. We're not there yet. You learn this on Daf Gimel, but you have to forget Daf Gimel for a minute. So we think that the two and the three, if you have to just testify, basically it was written correctly, testimony is in front of two because they're just going to be reporters. If you need a court to establish this is a sealed document, this is final, no one can ever question this, then you need three because that's what you need for a beit din. Says where that makes no sense whatsoever because you just said that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbah, right? Well, we'll get to it in a second. Says where Tizbara, Hamid Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omer Lefishem Bikian Lishma. Sorry. Since you said Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi must be like Rabbah, Lefishem Bikiyim Lishma, Rabbi Yochanan, who disagreed, must hold like Rava, that the reason is Rabbi Yochanan Amar Lefishem Edim Mitzuyim L'Kaimo, right? Right? And here Rabbi Yochanan says you need two. And you just said the reason you need two is because Ein Bikiyim Lishma. So here Rabbi Yochanan has to hold both opinions, which does not add up. Right? He argued with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he argued with Rabbi Chanina. He's got to be consistent. He's only one Rabbi Yochanan. And furthermore, of course, how could two ever be okay, according to Rabbah, if Rabbah agrees with Rava, that you have to verify the witnesses? So you always need three to do that. And if you need three according to Rava, you can't get away with two according to Rabbah. Everybody agrees. And really, you need to give the get to the woman in front of three witnesses, not three witnesses, three people who become a beit din. They're dayanim essentially, like when we do hatarat nidarim, right? Correct. You have to do it in front of three. The question is, the question here is, can the messenger be one of the edim, and can the aid be one of the dayanim, right? If you say you could do it in front of two, it means two other people. The shliach will be the third, right? So you have three. No. The shliach can be an aid, meaning he can testify and say, I saw it done, but he can't become part of the court. And so you need three additional people besides the shliach. And therefore you need three additional people. It's nothing to do with Fanai Nechtam, nothing to do with Rabbah and Rava. The question here is, as Miriam recalled, can the shliach be one of can he take off his hat as the shliach and say, I'm witnessing this act of the get being given to the woman? Not witnessing, verifying. Says Gemara, but that's great explanation. But there's not really a big debate about this. So Kaimalan, B'dirabanan, the rule that everybody knows from third grade is that whenever you're talking about halacha midirabanan, aid nasa dayan, that an aid can be a dayan. There's no machloket. And remember, the whole requirement to say fanai nechtam is only midirabanan, right? In the Torah, there's no such need whatsoever. It's all a gzeira, maybe to help the woman, we said earlier, so that if anyone ever doubts the get, they'll be able to say, no, this is a rock solid get. But it's not midoraita. So how could you argue about that? Ella says, Mara, that's not the point. The point is what the fact that Nava just raised. What if a woman is the shliach? A woman can be a shliach, but she can't be a dayan, right? So let's say Hachaba Miflagi, Mar Savar, Rabbi Yochanan, who says you need, Rabbi Chanina, who says you need 3, he holds Kivan to Isha Kishera Lahaviyat Get, since a woman, a wife, but even any other woman, it doesn't have to be the wife, any woman is kosher to be a shliach to bring an adult woman, is kosher to bring the get. Uzimnin demaiti la itita. Sometimes a woman will bring the get, and everyone's going to remember whenever you bring a get, you bring it in front of 2 people, right? Now that's because the shliach is usually a man, and he's the third. So this time a woman brought it. No one's going to remember that you need 3, and they're going to make a mistake, right? Samchi Allah, they're going to then rely on her, and that's it's going to break the bank. The Idach and Rabbi Yochanan holds that Isha Meida Yadi, people are recognize that there's a difference in terms of dayanut between a woman and a man, and they're not going to say, "Oh, last time we did it with 3 men, let's do it this time with two men and a woman." The lo samchi ala, no one's going to rely on her to be a dayan, and therefore, if that's the case, and a woman brings it, they'll have 3 dayanim. Tanya Kavatei Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, there's a Braita that says exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said, which is that you need 2 people, because it says in the Braita. Got this? Hamevi get me medinat hayam. We're like 10 lines from the bottom. We're really more, 14. A person who brings a get from medinat hayam, v'natnula, and he hands it to the wife, to the soon-to-be ex-wife, I guess when she got her get. V'lo amar la, and he doesn't say b'fanai nechtav, right? And then she goes and gets married. And 5 years later, someone plays the tape again, the security tape, and they find that he didn't say b'fanai nechtav. Says the Braita, Yotzi, she should leave her husband, her new husband, because she was never divorced. V'avlad mamzer, and any children they had are mamzerim. She was an eshet ish, she was never divorced, and it was a terrible thing. Divrei Rebbe Meir, the Chachamim omrim ein havlad mamzer. The child is not a mamzer. Stop exaggerating. Ketzad yaseh, what can you do at this time? Yitzlena himeno, tell her, go to your drawer. Now, again, we talked about this yesterday. Nowadays, we destroy the get, so it's not that helpful. But this says the Braita, tell her to go to her files, take out the get, v'yachzor, and give it back to the shliach. V'yitznen and he can give it to her again, v'fnei shnayim, in front of 2 people, which is the proof to Rabbi Yochanan. The yomar, and say, b'fanai nechtam. He can say, it was b'fanai nechtam. So that's the Braita. Right, and the Braita clearly supports Rabbi Yochanan agav orche, because it said do it in front of 2. That's the part we are quoting it for. But of course, once we quote the Braita, now we're like a little bothered by this, right? There's a gzeira midrabanan. You're supposed to say fanai nichtam. It's not midoraita, right? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir is so upset that you didn't say it that he's going to make her get divorced and make the children mamzerim. Ask the Gemara of Rabbi Meir, Mishum Delo Amar b'fanai nechtam yotzi v'avlad mamzer. That seems a little bit radical. That's Rabbi Meir. Yes, Rabbi Meir l'tamei. Rabbi Meir has a consistent opinion. The Amar Rav Hamnuna Mishmei de Ula. Rav Hamnuna was quoted as saying in the name of Ula, Omer Haya Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir used to say, one of his principles was, Kol ha-mishaneh mimatbe'ah shetavu chachamim b'gittin yotzi v'havlan mamzer. Every time that you deviate from the way the chacham, even though it's only Rabbanan, the Rabbanan set up this method of Gittin, and it's sacrosanct. If you deviate even a little bit from what they said, from the matbe'ah literally means the framework, right? It literally means the coin, but it means like something hard and fixed. From the fixed nature of what they said by Gittin, then that's deal breaker. It's fatal, and the get doesn't count, and you're yotzi v'havlan mamzer. Where am I?
The good news is that Rambam Paskins not according to Rabbi Meir. The second husband does not have to divorce her, and the child is not a mamzer.
Thank you. They know what's the chachamim, right? It's a dat yachid, but correct.
Yeah. Well, the chachamim don't discuss the whether she has to get divorced, but Rambam says she doesn't even have to get divorced.
Okay, great. Continues the Gemara. Let's try to do a few more lines before we got to stop. Bar Hadaya, I don't exactly know much about Bar Hadaya, but he, I assume it was he was asked to bring a get, so he was set up as a messenger to bring a get. Ata the Kamei Rabbi Achi, he came to Rabbi Achi Davi Mimuna Agiti, right? Rabbi Achi was the local expert, or maybe the national expert on Gittin. right? Which we have today as well, right? It's getting are very complicated. You don't just go, you can ask your regular rabbi if your pot is kosher, right? Everyone knows that, but you don't go to every single person to a get, right? Like Gerut or things like that, right? So he went to Rav Achi, who's the expert on Gittin, and Amar Lei, how do I do it? And he said, you've got to stand there and pay attention and verify that every single detail was done properly. Okay, this is how we're understanding it. So, and then he came in front of Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, and they said, "Lo tzrichin." You don't need to be that exact. Meaning, you don't need to be careful that every single part of the get was written lishma, just like the critical part, right? The last line. The chitema, and they said, and the Gemara says, and they said to him, if you say avir lechumra, if you say I'm going to be machmir, so I'm going to say b'fanai nechtam, every single word in the get. This is a get lechumra, right? Mahadrim and a mahadrim kind of get. I saw everything. That's a terrible idea because nimsat motzilaz al Gittin harishonim, right? Everyone's going to come and figure out, like they find that all the previous tefillin were not kosher, right? So everyone's going to come and going to be motzilaz al Gittin harishonim. They're going to be, I heard b'fanai nechtam, but maybe they only were b'fanai nechtam on the last line. Well, did they do the whole thing? Don't change. Stop it. Don't change the way it is. Okay. Continues the Gemara. I'm trying to think if we should stop here. I think we should. Well, no, let's keep going. Rabba Bar Chana Aiti Gita. Rabba Bar Chana once brought a get. Palga ichtiv kameh. Palga ichtiv kameh. Half the get was written in front of him, so he verified it. And again, written means that he knew that they were doing it correctly. And part of it was not. After the kameh Rabbi Elazar, he came in front of Rabbi Elazar and he said, "This is the scenario. I'm bringing this get. I only saw part of it being written. I didn't see the whole thing being written. I wasn't there for the whole thing." Amar Le, and Rabbi Elazar said to him, "Afilo lo katav ela shita achat lishma shuv eino tzarich." You only need to have one line. Shita means one line, right? Written lishma in order for it to count. Meaning you only have to verify that one shita was written lishma for it to count. Okay, Tosas here understands that it means the first line. So that as long as you know they started at Lishma, then you're comfortable saying that it was done Lishma. Rav Ashi says, Afilo, I'm just going to read the top line. Rav Ashi says, top line of Davav, Afilo kain humusa v'kain migilta. Even if you just see them preparing the kumus, or the kumus is the pen, right? The quill. Thank you. And the Megillah, which is the scroll, which you write on, right? The blank scroll before you do it. Even if you're just part of watching them doing that, and you see that they're doing that lishma, that's enough because you know that they know what they're doing, right? So they're starting off the process. You don't even have to see the writing lishma. And tomorrow we will continue. I'm going to stop here, but we'll see tomorrow from Tanya Kavatei Dervashi about exactly what you have to see and what participation you have to say was lishma. It's not the whole thing. We'll stop there. We'll continue Daf Vav. Everyone, Chodesh Tov again.
Thank you. Chodesh Tov.
And
Thank you. Chodesh Tov.
Kodesh Tov, Yasher Koach.
take care. Have a good week, everyone.